Welcome to the Intake Podcast. We are your hosts, Carson Miller and Travelle McManus, and this is the podcast where we dive into the media shaping our world today.
Awesome. And today we are bringing to you our almost straight out of the theater reaction to Captain America Brave New World. We'll be diving into the Super Bowl and whether we enjoyed it or found it rather disappointing, and going into some tiny screen stuff as we take a look at what has caught our attention on our smartphones this week. But first, we need to review our outtake from the last episode, where we each decided that we were going to take something out of our daily routine that involves media and technology. So, Travelle, tell us what your challenge was and how did it go?
Yeah, so my challenge was an hour in the morning, an hour before I go to bed, no phone. And I did that well for the most part. I did travel, and with traveling and then just the dynamics of where I was traveling to, staying with a friend, it just got
Right.
kind of messy. And so, waking up in the morning, we're in Dallas, doing things in Dallas. So waking up immediately, getting on my phone to look at where we're going to go. And
Right.
then that night, just not really abiding to that same rule. So trying to figure out how to balance that. And I think I can give myself a little bit of grace. I did take advantage of a weird situation that happened with my
Okay.
challenge. Bailey and I were in Dallas, and we went to the mall. And as we went to like the Galleria, so very big, parking the parking
Mm,
garage. Had to walk pretty far, and by the time we got we were halfway to the store we were trying to get to in the mall, I realized I didn't have my phone with me. I had
okay.
left it in the car. So I took this as an opportunity to try my best to spend this whole time in the mall without using my phone. Can't
Right.
say I stuck to that promise because we were there for a very long time, and Bailey went into this one store and said, "I'm going to be in here for a while." So that was her way of telling me, "You can go, just walk around." So I walked around. There wasn't a lot of stores for me, and shortly after, I was walking back to the car to grab my phone. But in the moments before we departed, it was nice, just like, because I think Bailey kind of took that cue as well of like, okay, he doesn't have his phone. I'm gonna put my phone down, and we're just gonna talk and walk
Yeah.
and just like be present for each other more than we normally would if we both had our phones with us. So
Right.
seeing that encourages me to do that more, especially since I have my Apple Watch with me. So it wasn't like I was away from any kind of emergency or communications, separating with Bailey. Like if she needed to get in
Right.
contact with me, she could. So yeah, that was mine. If I remember yours correctly, it was a whole day. Oh no, afternoon. Like what was the cutoff for
Right. Oh,
when you
that
started?
that's a good question. When the cutoff was, I had kind of a overwhelming week. It's had
Hmm.
some ups and downs. We were pretty busy in the evenings and was pretty busy at work. So there was an element of this was probably harder than it should have been for me.
Yeah.
Um, it was hard to go, man, I am not going to just get to sit down and watch a show. That hour to 2 hours at night before I go to bed it's still mine, but it's not, I don't get to do what I want with it. I
Yep.
don't get to finish a TV show that I'm in the middle of. I don't get to watch a YouTube video that I saved earlier in the day and really wanna watch. I'm cutting that out. It did allow me to start a book. I read a little bit of a book I'm just working my way through. It's a cookbook, so it's kinda hard to j I mean, I love cheeseburgers, but it's really hard to just read cheeseburgers on cheeseburgers on cheeseburgers as you're trying to go to bed.
Yeah.
But I did start another book, and I did do one evening, probably from about 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. of
Okay.
no TV, no movies, no phone. I mean, I'm sure there's still some texting or something, but I wasn't on social media. I wasn't on YouTube or watching anything on my phone. So, and we got some other stuff done. It allowed us to get some chores done. So there was some positive elements to it. Finding the right night to do it was the hardest part. There was one
Yeah.
night where I was just like, "Man, I can't do it tonight." Like,
Hmm.
my brain isn't gonna read a book. My brain is still racing from everything that happened throughout the day. I just wanna turn something on and allow myself to go to sleep. So, just finding that right day, I did it on Thursday night. Couldn't do Friday night because we went to go see a movie.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, man, which night is the best night? And it was probably a little bit harder than it should have been. So,
Yeah.
but with that said, we did spend Valentine's Day together and our
Yes.
wives came along with us. So shout out to them
Shout out to them.
being willing to go see a superhero movie with their husbands.
There's my romantic than going to an MCU movie on Valentine's Day.
Right.
So they really are the MVPs for that.
I mean, for some people, we did see two of our friends there who left their wives at home to go see the movie.
Yes.
So anyway, we saw it. We
saw
didn't
it?
talk about it a lot.
No.
Probably talked to our wives a lot on the way home. What were your
Yep.
thoughts? And we'll start with the good stuff and go to the bad stuff a little bit later.
Yes. So my first thoughts were there were things I liked and there was things I didn't really care for. And I overall had a good time. I'm kind of over the comparison game with MCU because it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's either it's too much or it's not enough. And I just don't think we're ever going to be able to really find that balance and the discord of comparing. So overall, I love feeling like there was a lot left on the table and
Yeah.
kind of like I don't want to say disappointed because then that makes it sound like it's bad, but the thing is I can't say disappointed because then that would mean that my expectations were high. My expectations weren't high, and I don't mean that they were. It was just I knew that this was going to be a middle of the pack, and then
Yeah.
it was the middle of the pack, and I was like, okay, that's fine, that's fine. So that's kind of what were yours?
My initial takeaway was I had some fun, I had some cringe, and there's a good movie in there somewhere. I'm just not sure we got it. And it's kind of the same way I felt about the Marvels, where I think there was a good movie in there. There was some plot there that made sense and really worked, but then it was filled with all this other stuff that just didn't do anything and didn't move anything forward at all. We're introduced to characters that are we going to see again? Are we not going to see again? Who knows? And it was middle of the road, maybe lower middle of the road. I don't know, bottom third of the MCU. Again, the comparison game is hard. It'd probably be easier to have the Infinity Saga be its own ranking, and then all of this other stuff, the multiverse saga that's come after, be its
I
own
like that.
ranking. I don't know.
Your rank a post saga ranking right there. Yes, and then that is I'm kind of I'm with you there. And we're supposed to start with positive, and it sounds like we're already all to
Okay, let's get
here.
to some positive.
But
Let's get to some
yes,
positive.
and I guess I'll go ahead and throw out the spoiler warnings. So we're going to do our best to be spoiler free, but we, in order to kind of share our feelings, we're going to have to dive into the story. So, we have the chapters listed in our notes. If you're on YouTube, you can use the chapters to skip ahead and come back to this after you've seen the movie. But yeah, we're going to do our best, but just no promises. So, but yeah, so likes. What were the things that you did like about the movie?
So Harrison Ford is the anchor for this entire movie. He's obviously the best actor in the movie. He has probably the best storyline in the movie. His character arc is the best. He's back as the president of the United States, which anytime that happens, it's a good thing for a movie. And so that storyline really worked. I would also say that the political intrigue and the story with the adamantium, that's not a spoiler, it's been in trailers. That storyline, that political intrigue surrounding that also really worked. Maybe that's because that's the majority of Harrison Ford's role in the movie and revolves around that. But that part worked. The Isaiah Bradley stuff for me worked. The Captain America or the soldier given super serum in the 70s and then tortured and put in jail and hidden from the world. That part worked for me. The new Falcon kind of worked for me. And a few other things that we'll get into a little bit later, but mainly is Harrison Ford. Anytime he's on screen, the movie works.
Yes, I really like Harrison Ford. I definitely think he was the anchor for this movie. And this was the most political MCU movie that we've had in recent years, at least, like to where we are interacting with the president. We're seeing policies and, political talk, and it worked for me. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting to see, and I think one thing that I did like was that it was answering some of the questions we had from previous movies,
Yeah.
related
Yeah.
to, and this is where we started kind of getting into some spoiled territory, like the internals and things like that of,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on with the giant, thing that's in the ocean right now, and
The
just like
celestial that comes out of the core of the earth and then is never mentioned again for 2-3 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so I like the politics behind that. I like just like that kind of conflict. And anytime that we were having those kind of conversations and we were
Mm.
part of that storyline, it worked for me. And
Yeah.
so really like that. I I love Anthony Mackie and I
Mm.
love the character of Falcon. I love the moral argument of the movie.
Right.
If you believe that everyone's bad, you've already lost the fight. And I
Mhm.
love seeing that being carried out time and time and time throughout the movie. I think that
Right.
kind of stays true to the Captain America movie storylines, that stay
Mm.
true to, what it means to be Captain America. So I think kind of what you said earlier, like there's a good movie in there. Like the same thing of like there's a Captain America story in here. You just have to
Right.
really look hard for it. And there were
Yep.
times I saw it, and then there were times
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the stuff that was hard, and you said that you love Anthony Mackie, but he's not a leading man. And I think that shines through.
Hmm.
In the previous Captain America movies and the previous Avengers movies, when he has his moment, he's great.
Yeah.
Him for an entire movie. And he's a better actor than I could ever be. I could never do what he does. 100%.
Hmm.
He struggled to carry a poorly written script
Yes.
and
Yes.
some of the fighting and acting. He just couldn't carry it out. And it's hard to play the comparison game, but he couldn't carry it out like Chris Evans did.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that. Chris Evans is the better actor.
And he goes is such a jump from being like even a side character, and that's
Mm.
not a knock on him or the character of Falcon, but going
Right.
from like truly a side character
Yep.
to being this main character is such a jump, and it
Mm.
requires a lot of powerful storytelling, a lot of authentic storytelling, a lot of
Right.
amazing writing, and so it is because I follow Anthony Mackie's career. I've seen a lot of movies from him. He's amazing, and when given fire, he can cook with it. But
Mm.
it was set up for failure, and
Right.
I think he did what he could with it, but it was just hard.
It's
It's
hard.
really hard.
Yeah.
You got really bad lemons, and
Mm.
he squeezed as much as he could out of it, and we had sour lemonade. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
That's true.
um,
Because in the Falcon and Winter Soldier show that's on Disney Plus, which I really enjoyed that,
mhm.
he he's great. Like,
Yeah.
it works. For whatever reason, it didn't work here for me.
And I was questioning that as well. And I think it was because there was a balance because that show was focused around him and
And
Bucky.
Bucky.
And so
Yep.
it was, the Captain and Winter Soldier. It was the bout and they fed off each other. I mean, my
Mhm.
favorite moment, this is where we get into the spoiler territory, was their short interaction in the movie.
Right.
And I knew it
Yep.
was going to happen eventually, but I knew because of Thunderbolt and things like that, he
Right.
wasn't going to be a key player in the story.
Mhm.
So I was glad we got something, and that
Right.
conversation reminded me how much I miss that show and
Mhm.
their dynamic and how much they truly do care for each other, their friendship and things
Yeah.
like that. And then he left and then we lost it.
And we
It
lost it.
sucks. And it sucks. And I
There
hate that.
was magic in that scene. The entire it was a snap. Okay, we're back to something that is really interesting, intriguing. The back and forth is great, and then he leaves and it's gone. The
Yeah.
magic walks out the door again, and the only time the magic is there is when Harrison Ford is on screen. And he's elevating poorly written material as well. It's not like his scenes were written any
Yeah.
better. Just Harrison Ford being Harrison Ford is able to handle that a little bit better. And
Mhm. Yes.
some of the other things would be CGI. There was moments where it looked fantastic, and then there was a couple
Mhm.
scenes specifically at the end of the movie where they were in front of a green screen and they didn't even hide it. It was really rough.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
the
I know
background is
exactly what you're talking
blurry.
about.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
The camera angle makes no sense. I don't know who shot those scenes, but it was really bad.
Mhm. Yeah, and I
And
think we
yeah.
transition into the this. I guess I'll stay with last thing that I like before I go into like those things
Mm,
as well was I did the aerial combat. I did enjoy. That was
yes.
probably the most fun I had in the movie was, and now granted the plot of it of them just like what they accomplished in those aerial scenes just
Right.
seemed very small to what we're used to, and they
Mhm.
even kind of talk about that too, like
Yeah.
we went from stopping aliens invading the planet to just trying to stop 2 planes from causing
Right.
damage. But the sequence itself, the way it was shot, the way that they
Yep.
captured, like, we've come a long way from how Falcon was executed in Winter Soldier to how he's
Mhm.
executed now. So that was really, and then with the
Right.
combination of the shield and then like the
Mhm.
Wakanda armor he has, it's really cool. It was
Right. It
really
is.
cool to see. I could see a bit of 20 years younger version of Travelle just drooling at that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I do try to take those things to mind when I'm watching this.
Mm.
But yes, going back to what you were saying, like the ground combat,
Yep.
not no.
Not good. It's really
Not
rough.
good.
It's very rough.
Not good. And when like it gets to a point where my wife and like other people know, that's when I'm like, oh, because every time I
Mm.
pick up on it and I'll say it and they're like, what are you talking about? But this it was
Right.
like it was noticeably bad at
Right.
times.
It was noticeably bad, and part of it didn't help that the villain, the main villain of the story, because Ford's not the villain. He
Mhm.
is his own story that is connecting Falcon, or I'm sorry, Captain America, to the villain in the movie. And the villain is straight out of a late 90s, early 2000s comic book movie. He didn't work for me. You need a
Right.
person in that role, and you need somebody to help connect the President's story with Captain America's story, and so you have to have that character. It was just not well executed, in my opinion.
Mhm.
It was kind of caricature some of the scenes that he was in, some of the lighting choices just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So there's just some of that that didn't work,
Mhm.
and I do have one final thing to say that is big spoilers. So this is like your final warning to move on, is the movie really struggles with exposition, where they are showing you something in one scene, the next scene, then they are telling you exactly what happened in that previous scene and making you as the audience member feel dumb. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
have just watched what happened and remembered it 10 seconds later because they tell you about it again. And then if the next scene happens and they tell you about it for a third time, and at that point, you're like, okay, I get it. Can we move the story along?
Yeah.
Part of my big issue is at the beginning, it is beating you over the head with Sam as Captain America. Sam as Captain America. Sam as Captain America. Sam as Captain America. And I think you needed some of that to get the audience on board who didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
Probably the first 20 to 30 minutes of the movie, it is non-stop. And then you get the middle of the movie, okay, fine. And at the end is finally where you get his version of Captain America's story, where you
Yeah.
get the commentary on, man, I should have taken the super soldier serum. Man,
That
I
was
can't
good.
believe I didn't do that. That's such a dumb
Yeah.
thing Bucky told me not to do. I should have done it.
Mhm.
Or his conversation with the new Falcon at the end. And I thought their relationship worked really well.
Yeah.
But their
Mhm.
conversation at the end of, I looked up to you because you didn't have that. And that whole dynamic and really making it Sam's story and his version of Captain America, I wish we had that for an hour and a half as
Yeah.
opposed to the final 20 minutes because the first half of the movie was wasted just beating you over the head. If I say it enough, you're going to believe it, as opposed to
Mhm.
showing us why we should believe it and
Yeah.
telling us a story that makes us want to believe that he is the new Captain America. So
Mhm.
that's a big spoiler discussion part of
Yeah.
it. So,
And this goes into what another conversation we can have later of like the problems of like the Disney Plus
mm,
spinoff shows with this kind of stories, like our wives, they're not watching this. So
no.
that was for them, that wasn't for us. But now you're just building that disconnect with your audience of people who
Right.
are needing to know this and people who already know it.
Mhm.
And it goes back to what you're saying, like we're not dumb. Like you say it one time, we get what that means. Okay, he's
Right.
Captain America now. We don't need it to be constantly repeated. And I
Mhm.
just think, yes, like if it truly was just a full story of what it means to be Captain America, him filling into that role.
Mhm.
We kind of saw that to a small degree of like Spider-Man Homecoming with him
Right.
being trying to be Tony Stark and what
Right.
that looked like, that journey.
Mhm.
That's now we're talking about Spider-Man, so that's completely different.
Right.
But they could have taken something from from that degree, but it just wasn't. And it was a really bold, I would say reckless move to try to bring in a character in a villain role from a movie that's almost like 20, that's like close to 20 years old.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, like like when I saw that, I was like, oh, we're going back there. Like
Mhm.
that is crazy. And so,
It was
um,
I mean, it would take somebody who is highly, highly invested to be able to remember a throwaway scene at the end of a movie that was just okay in 2008 for this to
yep,
make sense. And it
yep,
does make sense. And I don't hate the character. I just don't feel like it was executed very well.
hmm
It was,
and like the
I don't
concept
know.
of him of what he could do was very
Mhm.
interesting. It
Yep.
was very dark. It was very sinister, but it just, yeah, it just did not.
Mm.
It just didn't land. The moves, the motives,
Right.
like it just wasn't from the villain's aspect. It just wasn't there, and so
Right.
that was, and that's always been Marvel's strength. Is like the better the villain is, the better the movie
Better
is.
than
That's
movie.
just
Yeah.
that's the equation, and
Yep.
so it stinks that we, yeah, and
With all that
yeah,
said, I didn't hate the movie.
no,
I've
no,
had a
not at
pretty
all.
decent time. It's just not it wasn't a great movie. It's better than Madam Web. It's nowhere
Yeah.
near most of the Marvel stuff we've gotten in the past.
Mhm.
And so I don't hate it. I had a good time. I had a good time seeing Red Hulk. Those action
Yep,
sequences were great. His
and
CGI,
we're
they got
yeah,
his CGI right.
they did.
Have to. You have to get the Hulk CGI right. Everything else,
Mhm,
fine, whatever. But
mhm.
overall, didn't hate it, didn't love it. Obviously had some issues with it, but hopefully
Right there with you,
Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four step up the level up a little bit and
and
take
I
us to
yeah.
back to those same heights.
And I've been skeptical of this movie for any kind. Yeah, I've been skeptical about this because it
Yep.
does seem like that's where their focus is for this year, which
Right.
is fine. They probably
Yep.
feel like they just have a better story to work with. I mean, Thunderbolt has an amazing cast that's just going to really
Yep.
kill it. And same for Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four is going to play a bigger role in the
Right.
overall story that we've been wanting ever since
Yep.
in game. And so that's where their time
Mm.
and investment is. And it just I didn't I had a slight sliver of hope that they would
Mm.
surprise us with this
Right.
because it was so under the radar that they
Yep.
would just take that as an opportunity to just sneak it in and produce something that would just blow us away. But it just met
Mm.
expectations of, yeah, y'all, this really was to the wayside. Like this really was
Right.
just an afterthought. And the cast, they took what they could and they made
Yep.
a good story with it, but not a great one. And that's
Not a
what
great one.
the expectation for these MCU movies are, is to be
Right.
great.
Yep.
And so I really do hope, and this will be my last point of I really do hope with Anthony Mackie and Sam
Mm.
Wilson, with him and this spoiler territories again, with him being set up to be the face of the Avengers.
Right.
I really hope that they really take some time to invest in his
Mhm.
character and invest in a deeper relationship with him because I
Yep.
don't like he does Anthony Mackie as an actor, Sam
Right.
Wilson as a character, the new Captain America. He deserves a better story. He
Yep.
deserves for us to feel invested in him and for him not to be as
Right.
dry as they delivered him
Mhm.
in this movie. So that's, yeah.
Yep. He's his most dynamic when he's in his counselor mode that we meet him
Yes.
in Winter Soldier, is
And I
when
think
he
that will
is.
serve us well
Yep.
in a bigger Avengers storyline,
Right.
but we still need to be invested in him as an individual and not just as a, yeah, like you said, as a counselor.
And there's a whole postmortem to do on this era of the MCU. There's a whole bunch of production drama, company drama for Disney that feeds into some of this, and it'll have to
Yes.
be its own separate thing. But there's a whole bunch of reasons, I think, for some of this being the way it is, but we don't have time for that. We got to watch the biggest game of the year at your house, had a big Super
Yes.
Bowl party. I will say that we had a quiz. I don't know, is it a betting game? I don't know how you describe it.
Yeah, I was forgot. Yeah, questionnaire where we
A
just like a
questionnaire,
prediction
prediction
game,
game.
commercials and score
Yep.
and football stats and scores and yeah.
And it made it the most intense national anthem I have ever been a part of for any sporting event, televised or
Oh,
in person.
that was
We had
so good.
to the over under on the length of the national anthem was 2 minutes. It was
2
2 minutes
minutes.
or longer or less than 2 minutes, and you had to pick one. And we were all when he refrained, "The land of the free" 3 times, we were
Yeah.
all screaming at the TV. Some of us were saying, "Do it again," and some of us were saying, "Please stop.
Stop.
We need this to end so we can get our points, for this prediction
'Cause
game that Travelle set up."
his tempo kept changing, so it was like,
Oh,
"Okay,
man.
we're gonna be under 2. We're gonna be under 2."
Right.
And then he starts repeating it, it's like, "Oh, no, no, we're not." And then he speed up again and right at 2, which then
Right.
made it like a logistical nightmare for me because it was because of how the question was worded and, like,
Right.
people getting mad, but it was fun. That
That
like,
was
that's yeah.
that was the best part of the night for me. I'll be honest. That was easily the best part of the night. So Joanna wasn't feeling well, so I brought our 2-year-old Dash with me to your house, and I was on full dad duty. And luckily, the game, in that way, luckily the game turned out to not be
Yes.
so great because I was 0% invested in the game. My
Yes.
sports fandom does not make me lean really either way for the Eagles or the Chiefs. I wanted a
Mhm.
good game. I thought history would have been cool to see the Chiefs three-peat, but the
Yeah.
Eagles winning wasn't the absolute worst outcome for me either, so didn't really care. But overall, the game was kind of rough and a
Yeah.
blowout, and I don't like Tom Brady's announcing. So overall, for me, Super Bowl was kind of a bust, and I was driving home at halftime to get him in bed on time. So I didn't even really see the halftime show. I've heard it was
Yeah.
interesting. It was good for some people, not so good for some other people, but
Mhm.
I think it had messaging and was a story that was being told on the stage, which makes it probably one of the more interesting and probably better Super Bowl halftime shows because there's something actually being said as opposed to just a whole bunch of nonsense happening up on stage.
Yeah, and before I dive into that, yeah, my feelings on the game was the same. Like, I just wanted a good game, and the Luka trade kinda took away my Super Bowl week, but the
Mm,
information that I was getting leading up to the game started making me feel like the Eagles were going to win this. It just seemed
right,
like they were more focused, they were more locked in. There was just a lot of conversation around the Chiefs. They're too busy trying to get copyrights for, like, the three-peat title. I wanted to see that history, and I thought it would be cool, but
right.
after just seeing Jalen Hurts, how he represents
Mm,
himself, how prepared he was. And I've loved his journey all the way back
right.
from Alabama. So it was just really cool to see him perform on the biggest stage like that to that degree. I do love good defense. I do love seeing
Yeah.
I growing up I was a Steelers fan, still curtain. So seeing solid defense like that, elite defense like that
Mm,
really is cool to see, but you
right,
still want there to be some level of parity, something,
right.
a back and forth when you have it would be great to see, the greatest defense against not the greatest, a great defense against a great offense, but it was a great defense
Mm.
against a very unprepared offense, which is so
Right,
crazy to say about the Chiefs.
right.
But yeah, that's where we were. But yeah, the Super Bowl, I mean, I'm a Kendrick Lamar fan. I've
Mm,
listened to Kendrick Lamar ever since I was in middle school. So I was very excited about this. There was a lot of questions on if this was going to be a Kendrick Lamar version of the Super Bowl or a Super
mhm,
Bowl version of the Kendrick Lamar
yep,
because getting the announcements that he was going to perform,
mhm,
I had to sit back and think like, does this really make sense when you think
right,
of your typical Super Bowl halftime performance layout? Like that's just not
mhm,
his style. But he did carry out in his style with telling a story
yep,
that was polarizing for sure, a
yep,
story that had a lot of messaging, a lot of things that you're just not going to pick up your first time watching.
right,
There were things I loved about it. Like, I mean, I relate to the messaging. I've always related to Kendrick's music.
mm,
Um, their mixing was bad. I will say that it was
okay,
very hard, and I thought it was me. I thought it was our house, maybe our speakers, but
right,
I felt like across the board, his with him being his music being so lyric focus and him
Mm.
having songs that you can barely even sing along to because they're so fast, like the
Right.
words he's used, it made it even harder when you could barely even hear those words because the
Right.
beat is just booming through his voice. So
Right.
that was just like a technical thing that kind of took
Mm.
me away from it. Especially my first time on top of people talking as well.
Right.
It just kind of took me away from it. I had to sit and watch it by myself, and that's when I pick up on a lot of the different messaging. But it was good. I mean, it was a good message. I love the
Mm.
message. I but I also am someone who has loved the tradition of the Super Bowl halftime performances
Right.
and the concert like feeling that they
Mm.
invoke. And so you didn't get that. So if you were looking
Right.
for that, I know you're like whoever
Yeah.
looking for that, probably a little bit disappointed with what they got. And I completely understand that. I don't view that as like a polarizing
Right.
or it's just different. It was just
Yep.
different than what we've had from previous years. And even with Kendrick, like his other like performances and live performances have been
Mm.
very more what's the word? Very more aggressive than a
Mm.
Super Bowl performance. So even at
Okay.
so someone on the other end of it too, who really likes him pushing the boundaries and
Right.
really being provocative in what he
Mm.
communicates, I was then also not disappointed, but just like it makes sense that he's not going to be able to execute on as strong of a message in the Super Bowl performance like this
Right.
because it just not it's going to cause problems for the NFL, for Jay Z, for everyone involved. So I got exactly what I was expecting, and that was fine.
Right.
So yeah, it was good.
Yeah. I mean, I have zero expectations of any Super Bowl halftime show. I am there for the Super Bowl, and
Yeah,
there's a concert in the middle of it, and whether that is something that everybody likes or something that people don't like, I'm there to experience it along with other people and see other people's reactions as opposed to my own. Like, Rihanna performed, was that year, 2 years ago?
2 years
Um,
ago.
2 years ago? Again, I had no reaction to it, but I was happy that other people were happy about it, because I
So
was there for the football.
so are you saying you're not the person who always tweets on the day of the Super Bowl? There's a football game during the inter halftime performance. It's like every year, it's like,
No.
I get it, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's not funny anymore, but it's like,
Right.
there's gonna be a football game at the Kendrick Lamar concert tonight, and there's gonna be a football
Yeah.
game at the Usher concert tonight. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. You're here for the halftime performance. It's
Mm.
funny, but it's the Super Bowl. It's
It's the
football.
Super
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I get that. That is
Yeah.
so my and since you were on dad mode, I don't know how much you were paying attention to this, but I think my biggest disappointment of this year's Super Bowl is that it has confirmed after previous because we've hosted Super Bowl party for
Mhm.
about 4 years now, and
Yeah.
with the prediction game, it's very commercial focused to get
Mm.
people that are not like us more involved
Right.
and have things to look for besides just the game itself, where I'm not
Right.
asking them stat questions. And for because of that, I have to be more aware of what commercials are being played.
Right.
And I'm just at the point where I just think we're past good commercials. It's
Yeah.
just bad.
Mm.
There's been a lot of AI chatter, and I'm not until I
Mm.
see something that proves that, I'm
Right.
not gonna just outright say that, but I can't really disagree
Mm.
with this idea that something is off with just the creativity,
Mm.
the types of commercials we're getting. Like we're just getting a lot of weird like a lot of vague things that don't even really communicate what they're providing or find clever ways to like bring their services and
Mm.
what the commercial is bringing together. It'll be
Right.
something crazy, shock value. Just it's just kind of
Yeah.
lost its meaning of what it means to be like,
Mm.
the highest paid advertisement for the
Right.
year.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I didn't pay that much attention, um, because I was on dad mode, and I was trying to stop him from getting, like, icing all over him and, all those type of things, letting your dog out when he wasn't supposed to, a whole bunch of a whole bunch of fun things. However, I feel like Super Bowl commercials peaked from like 2008 to 2000, like 14, 15,
Yeah.
when YouTube was a little bit newer. It wasn't quite as big as it is now. It wasn't people's version of TV. Like there's a whole
Yeah.
generation coming up behind us where YouTube is their television. They don't
Yeah.
pay attention to actual television. And so I think Super Bowl commercials had their heyday there because they could be a little bit provocative and you could share
Mhm.
them online, but you weren't at that time, you weren't constantly getting ads all the time. There wasn't the 24-hour news cycle was there, but it wasn't as intense as it is now, where you're constantly your phone is the news articles, the ads are constantly trying to provoke you. So for a Super Bowl commercial to evoke some sort of reaction out of you, they do have to get really out there now, really wacky, not make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I saw part of the Dunkin' Donuts one and I had no idea what was happening.
Yep.
I mean, just because Ben Affleck there doesn't make it a good commercial.
Exactly.
But so I think there is an element of it's lost its luster a little bit. A
Yeah.
Super Bowl commercial doesn't hold as much meaning as it used to, outside of the pure $8 million for 30-second ad, which is crazy.
And you made a real good point. I think like the YouTube aspect of it too, like, and I saw this in an interview with Mr. Beast where he talks about how his videos gets more views than the Super Bowl. And so
Mm,
when he is talking to companies about advertisement on his videos,
right.
he's approaching it from the mindset of your video is going to get more views than than they would if they were on the Super Bowl. And I'm wondering if that's companies moving away from investing a lot of money and a lot
Mm,
of production, like not just from like the ad perspective, but also from like the production perspective of,
right.
you know, hiring these teams to make this video because it needs to be polished, it needs to look great. Where for YouTube,
Mm,
you know, it could be as simple as read this line and we'll pay
right.
you this money. And
Right.
I just think companies are probably not as focused in on the Super Bowl as they were during that time because there's
Right.
just so many different outlets and
Yeah.
ways to get your brand across now compared
Mhm.
to then. But now we suffer at like it's just surprising to me that other like maybe companies that don't have that creative pipeline
Mm,
aren't taking advantage of this new era of like really bad commercials and kind of coming in and
mm.
figuring it out and, you know,
Yeah.
keeping us entertained during those breaks where now it's just kind of, what was that?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah,
going on?
that was weird.
Yeah.
What is
Like,
happening on
oh, a
TV?
famous celebrity poorly acting and or acting really well, but just then it's
Right.
like, well, what's the commercial about? Oh, it's Dunkin' Donuts. Cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, it
They've
stinks.
lost their luster. I haven't gone back to look up a single Super Bowl commercial.
No.
In that time period, you would watch the Super Bowl, and then the next day, you're on YouTube looking for the Super Bowl commercials to be posted because you wanted to see them. I have no desire to watch any of them.
Hmm.
I don't even know what they were.
Yeah. There's
So,
even like and then like movie trailers too. That was something we were talking
mm,
about. Like there was only two at the it was Thunderbolts and How to
yeah.
Train Your Dragon because that's like one of the
Yeah,
questions.
right.
And no, actually, it wasn't. It was
There
Thunderbolts. It was
there was Jurassic World too, I think.
oh, there was okay,
I think there was
okay,
3, yeah.
okay. So,
But no
but
Superman,
no
big movies that are
Superman,
coming.
no Fantastic Four,
Right,
like no Mission Impossible.
right.
So it's interesting. Like
Yeah,
that was just something I was like, yeah, like this is like the fourth, fifth year that we just have horrible commercials. I guess that
yeah,
cements it. Like that's our future.
that is our future. Our future is YouTube, and I had a really weird video to share with you this week,
I love that transition.
and part of what I always claim is my YouTube usage is educational stuff, learning something new that I didn't know before. And I think I claim that more than it actually ends up being true. But this week it was true. I learned about zip codes and why we have them and why we have to write our full address and a zip code here in America. So the way this video works is it kind of just walks you through why we have a zip code in kind of a fun animated style, and then it kind of takes you from where we're at to where other countries have gotten with their zip codes. So
Oh.
the zip code has nothing to do with your location. So when we're writing a zip code on a piece of mail, It has very little to do with our location, like our exact precise GPS location. It has more to do with the sorting system the US mail service uses to get that letter from one point to another. So, like, the first
Okay.
number represents a region of the United States, like New England or the South or the Pacific Coast, things like that. So that's what that first number represents. And then it breaks it down until like the final two numbers do have to do with your specific closest mail location, mail station that then puts it on the right truck to get to your address. But the address is still what gets it directly to you. The zip code is just part of their sorting process. But there have been countries like Ireland that did away with that system. And they have assigned every address in their entire country a specific zip code that, because technology has advanced so much, the zip code, there's three letters that kind of tell the same sorting system, and the final four numbers tell it's like code for your exact GPS location. And it's completely randomized across the country. There's no order to it hardly at all. And that allows them to constantly assign new codes to each location. So if your business opens up, you get your own unique code. And if you wanted to mail something to that location, all you would have to write is technically the postal code and it would get there. You didn't even have to write the address because of the way that
Oh,
technology works now. And so we are using an archaic system here in the United States by doing address and the zip code. In Ireland, you just have to write the code. It was very interesting. We'll link to the
that
video
is
below.
interesting.
They do a better job explaining it than I have.
No,
But
that's
found it
really cool.
very, very intriguing. Also, we're the only us in the Philippines are the only countries that call it a zip code.
What?
Everybody else calls it a postal code.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard postal code before, but I
Right.
didn't know that would be theoretically the same thing as a zip code.
Yep.
Interesting. Oh, that would be so as someone who constantly forgets their address and constantly forgets our I worked years ago, I worked for a company where we had to ship out a lot of sales, brochures, and things like
Mm.
that. And we would write the envelopes. And
Mhm.
that was like the first time I ever wrote mail. So I had to learn like this is like the, the person, the company, the address, the city, the zip
Mhm.
code. And it was like for some reason that was
Right.
so hard for me to remember. And how wonderful would it be to just
Yep.
put name, code, move on.
Move on.
And
Yep.
so that is interesting. Like
Yep.
I've always wondered the number because since I've lived in different states and seen different zip codes, I
Right.
wondered if it was just like a naming convention of like, okay, well, we'll start one and kind of work our way down.
Right.
And then, because like Virginia's two, here it's seven.
7. Yep.
Yeah, we'll start with
It's
seven.
7.
And so that is, yeah,
Yep.
I'm going to go back and watch that one.
Yeah.
So,
It's a very interesting watch. I think it's like 10 minutes. It's not very
yeah,
long.
sure.
And so Missouri is 6, but that's a whole region. So like Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Ohio, I think are all 6 or something like that. There's
Okay.
groups of state that start with 6 or start with 2. It's very interesting. So that was my
Nice.
tiny screen for the week. And I know that you have kind of a follow up to last week's tiny screen for you.
Yes. So last week the Luka trade took over my whole life
Mm.
and it kind of fell into this week as well. And it became even more so because not because of the Luka trade, it was already planned, but I did go to Dallas this past week and my wife went for one reason, I went for a completely different reason, and that was to go to a Dallas Mavericks game. And so, the few days leading up to that, I was just very interested in the Mavericks PR
Mm.
team, communication team. As someone who's dreamed of having that position before, I was just curious of what would like what would life look like if I woke up and I was working for the Mavericks and Luka got traded? And what
Right.
content, what am I going to be creating? And so I just noticed a lot of, limit, their comments are very limited on all
Right.
platforms. You cannot
Mhm.
comment, just kind of moderating, but you see a lot of promotion of the new
Right.
players that got traded, Anthony Davis, Max Christie.
Mhm.
And so going there and actually seeing it in real time was just a really
Right.
interesting experience. not a lot of Luka jersey with fans. As far as the
Mm.
stores, there were no Luka jerseys. They
Okay.
were cleaned out.
Wow.
80 jerseys already on display, already ready
Wow.
to be sold. And interesting enough, their hype video and just like the feeling before I even go to like the actual game, like just the arena itself, it just felt weird. It
Mm.
felt quiet.
Yeah.
Like you saw like it just, I was cheering for the Heat. So like I wanted to talk to fans, but I just realized I probably shouldn't. I
Right.
just don't know how they're gonna respond to me. I didn't want to come across as taunting. Because
Right.
I truly do like they won and I was happy for them. I was like,
Right.
Mavs fans deserve this right now. But
Yep.
I didn't wanna come across as taunting, so I just kinda just was an observer, and it really was just, like, a weird experience, and then the hype video
Mm.
talking about bad edits of Captain America, there were bad edits of their hype video where they clearly were editing out Luka's
Right.
spots. Anthony Davis had, like, 1 or 2 solid plays
Mhm.
before he got injured and was gone and now is out for a few weeks, and they played that clip in the
Right.
highlight clip like 5 or 6 times, just from
Yeah.
different angles.
Mhm.
And Max Christie, who was also included this trade, had a great
Mm.
night, and they put his stats on the big screen. Every time he made a play, they replayed it.
Right.
There were fans like Kyrie had a great game the night before. He did not play. He
Mm.
had 42 points, and when I sat in my seat, there was this. I wish I brought it. I have a picture of it I can put on the side, but there was this fan that has Kyrie like doing the heart, saying
Mm.
we love Nav fans. So just
Right.
all the PR
Yeah.
crisis things at the end, you
Mm.
did get Fire Nico chants,
Yeah.
by, like, a small group of fans, but it did pick up steam near the
Right.
end, like, it got loud enough to where I have a video,
Mm.
I'll try to post it here as well, and you can kinda you could like,
Mm.
I heard it earlier in the game, and I recorded it, and you couldn't hear it in the video, but then
Right.
the second time, it was like, "Okay, you can hear it, people are
Yeah.
saying it, people are chanting it," and I was trying to see if they got escorted out, I don't think anyone did, it was, like, the last minute of the game,
Mm.
but since yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah.
It was the most excited I've ever been to go to an NBA game just because of the whole context of what was happening,
Right.
and it was an amazing game, close, right to the wire,
Mm.
but yeah, it was an experience.
That would be an experience to go to not a team that doesn't feel like they are, like, in mourning. The team
Yeah.
may still be a little bit, but they're ready to move on, keep playing basketball, but a fan base that is just mourning the loss of the best and favorite player for a team. That would be a
Mhm.
unique experience for sure.
Yes, and it was a weird timing because it's still fresh,
Mm.
but it is their 3rd or 4th game since the
Right.
Luka trade, so it wasn't fresh enough to where I was getting because I know, like, their 1st game, there was, like, a protest
Yeah.
out there, so
Right.
there was no, like, massive, like, "Oh, man, this is like, the place is burning," but there was just
Right.
enough in the air to know that things were still not right,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, it was
Alright.
interesting.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up our big screen, small screen, tiny screen for this week. We
Yep.
know that we're going to kind of enter the outtake here. And this week's challenge is a little bit different. We're going to challenge each other to intake something that we don't feel like the other person would normally take in within a week. So I will start off and I'm going to
Yeah.
challenge you to watch some Star Trek. Star Trek
Okay.
is super close to my heart, and we can do many, many episodes about my fandom for Star Trek. But I am going to recommend 3 episodes from 3 different Star Trek series. You don't have to watch them all, because if you watch the first one and go, "Man, this really is just not for me," I'm not gonna force you to watch the other 2, but each one is very different. You're gonna get a different flavor of Star Trek from each. So, the first one is from the original series, the 1970s, or I'm sorry, 1967 is the original air date for this episode. The City on the Edge of Forever. Star Trek, the original series, season 1, episode 28. It's one of the best Star Trek episodes there is, and I
Okay.
think it's a good place to start. The second episode will be from Star Trek: The Next Generation, original air date in 1989. So almost 2 decades, or a little over 2 decades after the original series, and it is from season 2, episode 9, called "The Measure of a Man," and it's about one of the characters is an android, and what is his status in their world? Is he a person
Okay.
or is he not? It's a great episode. And then a very much a newer episode of new version of Star Trek. It's animated, kind of in the style of Rick and Morty. So Star Trek Lower
Oh,
Decks, a
interesting.
shorter episode, kind of adult animation. It's called Fully Dilated. It's in the 5th season, I believe, and it definitely takes a more comedic turn in this version of Star Trek. But and this is the one that I think you're really engaged with probably the most, but you get a kind of a different flavor. So those 3
Okay.
episodes would probably be about, I don't know, 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of Star Trek. I'm gonna ask you to take in some Star Trek and report back on how you feel about it.
Okay. Cool. All right. And so I'm excited. I mean, I have always been a adjacent to Star Trek.
Mhm.
My granny growing up loved Star Trek, so it was always
Okay.
in the background, but it wasn't a show that would like catch like Star Wars. That's actually how I got into Star Wars. It was playing in
Okay.
the background, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden I sat down and I just looked at the
Right.
screen and my life just changed. Star Trek never just because it doesn't have those
Right.
kid elements of like
Mhm.
ships and lasers and all that stuff. So
It
that
has
didn't
it
catch.
has that some degree. It's just not as much as Star
Okay.
Trek.
Okay. And so, but yeah, so I know she's going to be super happy when I tell her about
Okay.
this. But yeah, no, I'm excited. So for me to you, I got three options.
Okay.
So same, similar where anime has been just a huge part of
Mm.
my life. I've loved anime ever since I was 10 years old. Probably see the Funko Pop collection. Most of these are
Yep.
anime characters. Love Japanese storytelling. Love anime art style, different anime art styles.
Right.
So I have three different movies, all different, slightly different genres for you to go and pick one that you think you
Okay.
would like.
Yep.
About an hour and a half, not that long.
Okay.
And so we have Boy and the Heron, which
Okay.
actually won Best Animated Movie
Right.
over Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Right.
And so that one, don't want to go too much into what it is. Just it is
Mhm.
an amazing story. It's a coming of age story
Okay.
of
I
a
do like
young
those.
boy, and it is just a beautiful art style, really heartfelt storytelling. And so we have that. We have Spy Family. This is a
Okay.
comedy, a very sweet-hearted family, the sweetheart story
Mm.
about a family where they all have a side job, but they're acting as they're a fake family
Mhm.
where the dad is a spy, the
Right.
mom is an assassin,
Mhm.
and the daughter is a mind reader. But they're
Okay.
all but like the marriage is fake. The
Mm.
adoption, like they adopted this girl because they're acting out. They all have reasons to pretend to be a family,
Okay.
and none of them know what the other person's true occupation is.
Okay.
And so it's very, very comedic, a lot of fun, a lot of humor to it. It's really
Right.
funny. It's not dark. Even with the wife being assassin, it's very lighthearted. So
Okay.
that's a fun one. And then this one is more on the romantic side,
Okay.
but and I'm not someone who like romantic movies, but this one made me and my wife cry. And it's
Mhm.
called Your Name. I don't think it won. I think it might have got nominated for an animated movie, but I don't think it won
Right.
the Oscars. But
Yeah.
one of the best animated films I've ever seen. The art style
Okay.
is beautiful. It's a story of a boy and a girl that just swaps bodies. It's a Freaky Friday
Okay.
storyline told
Yeah.
in a really beautiful, authentic way.
Okay.
So I'll send
Awesome.
you like a trailer of each one so you
Yeah.
can really get
Yeah.
a feel of what you'll get into, and then
Okay.
take one and you go with it.
Yeah. I have very little experience in that genre. I did hear about Boy and the Heron. We didn't watch it when it was nominated, but I
Mhm.
heard that it was really good. So it'll be
It's
interesting
good.
to pick between 3 very different versions of it, I think,
Mhm.
and to see how it goes. But I'm excited to kinda dive in and see what it's all about.
Boom.
So, I think that kind of takes us into the very end here, as we start to wrap up, we're going to tease just a little bit of what's coming at you guys next week. We are not going to do the big screen, small screen, tiny screen. We're going to do something we call rank and explain. And we are going to
Sure.
rank and explain our top 10 most anticipated movies of 2025. So, kind of a sneak preview of some of the things that are going to be coming throughout the rest of this year and which ones we are most excited about as we head into the rest of 2025.
And I'm going to highly encourage y'all for this next one to tune in via YouTube because we're going to try to make it pretty interactive, not too interactive to where our listeners cannot enjoy the experience, but I think you'll
Right.
just get more value out of the conversation if you are watching it via video. And
Right.
so,
That's
so
going to be
yeah,
good.
so thank you so much for tuning in to the Intake podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, rate, share with your friends. You can watch all of our video podcasts on YouTube at youtube.com/the intake. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at the Intake Pod, and share your own intake experience with us via email at intakepod@gmail.com. This podcast is produced by us, Travelle McManus and Carson Miller. And until next time, consume wisely and stay thoughtful.